I'm here with new George Mason head coach Tony Skinn. I appreciate the time. I know it's a busy time. Doesn't I don't know if there is an off time in college basketball anymore, but how are you feeling? I know it's been a crazy couple months for you.
I'm doing better. It's I'm looking at the calendar. I think this is like day 70, so things are slowing down just a little bit. We got all our guys on campus now. We started workouts on Monday. And it's definitely been a whirlwind, but I'd say I'm in a good space, thus far.
Definitely. And just looking back kind of at your press conference when you first were hired, I know you stated you haven't been this excited about something since you've been a basketball player. Obviously, go back to your basketball days, it is George Mason. Just I know you've talked about it at length, but just coming home, being able to establish a culture that you're familiar with. But moving forward, what does a Tony Skinn coach team look like at George Mason moving forward?
I mean, the biggest thing is that for a guy like myself who, I wouldn't say was undervalued, but whenever I measured in, it was 5'11" and a half. 165 pounds. I was always an underdog. And not to say that George Mason is an underdog of a program, but that same work ethic that I had as a player, the same work ethic that I've seen along the way in my journey working around some really, really good people, but also some really, really good coaches. You learn some things naturally that you want to bring to your day to day. And that's who we are. That's who we're going to be. We're going to work every single day. We're not going to take any shortcuts. My goal as a coach is not just to help these guys from a basketball standpoint, but also from a mentorship standpoint. And when you're learning how to be the best version of yourself every single day, typically I think that translates on the court. And so for me, my vision is just to help these guys along the way. Every day we come in there, we're going to work. It's going to be 40 minutes of hell, but that next day it gets a little bit easier. And if we're competing at a high level, if we're challenging each other, hopefully those pieces are falling together, and that's creating our culture.
Absolutely. And you mentioned, you've obviously in the coaching ranks have been around. You're coming from a successful, obviously very successful Maryland program. I know recruiting in the DC area is obviously a big thing for you. You stated that early on. What does it mean to be a part of now? I would say, not just a basketball rich, area talent wise, but even you look at the coaches, what Caputo's doing at GW, obviously Willard at Maryland, which you're very keen on, and, Georgetown with Cooley. It's a competitive area. What are you looking for? What are you hoping to provide, for, again, a lot of these kids that have a lot of options as well within the area?
Yeah, the one thing that I'll say, and I'll continue to say is the DMV, and this is no disrespect to any other demographic out there. There's a lot of schools here. But there's also a lot of players. And, when you look at each class, you can only take a player or two per class anyway. So I do think it gets overstated a little bit about us trying to pick at each other. You're going to have different guys at different levels. But I think the talent is just so rich in this area where you're going to be able to get who you need that fits your program and fits your culture. And like you said, us knowing each other in this area, I don't think that it should ever be, hey, me versus, Chris Caputo, or vice versa. There's enough talent in the city. And so, having that kind of, I wouldn't say in my back pocket, but just knowing this area, knowing this demographic, but then also matching that with a place that raised me, a place that, at the end of the day, I can sell the school because I was a part of it. I think that combination, when you add, a couple guys that are also from this area on my staff, I think it's truly something that can help us kind of separate ourselves in those conversations, because there's certain things that at the end of the day, we're all coaches. But there's just certain things that families, kids, players, their support system, they do their own research, and you almost don't have to tell that story. And so that's going to be our advantage, in my opinion. But again, I'm fortunate to be in this DMV area where, there's just not going to be a lot of having to go outside of the box. And again, we want to go outside the box as well, because, like you mentioned earlier, this league is talented enough to be able to recruit nationally at this level. But it starts within the first 3 hours of the DMV.
Definitely. And, obviously as a prestigious alum yourself, I'm sure obviously you've been, I know you were at Maryland, but you're watching, you're following Mason. just a little bit, obviously about what Kim English was able to do. I know it was a short period there, but obviously, they get 20 wins next year. With the coaching change as well, obviously a lot of players, went with him over to Providence, but you brought in a lot of guys too. Just talk about, what this first chapter for you, what you brought in. I know it's early, you're just starting off season workouts, but kind of the makeup of your team and what you like,
Yeah, no, the challenges of getting the job. When I got the job, it was just a range of motions. You know, you're just like in it trying to see if you can get it. Then you get closer. You're like, okay, I think I might have this opportunity. And at the time for me, I was locked in with Maryland because we just came out of, NCAA tournament second round and we had momentum. And I'm a fearless recruiter. So even before the season was ending, I was already working and just trying to see what our needs were. And so when I had the opportunity to start having these conversations with George Mason, I kind of felt like a double agent because I knew the place that, Mason would be in given a coaching change. But once that switch got flipped, I was able to get together with my staff and hire them. That was it, because when you get this job this late and you add in the element of NIL, you add in the element of portal, it's unthinkable in April to be able to get what you want to get, especially when you have 9 scholarships. But again, credit to my staff in putting together what I think is a really, really good team. Again, in this portal at this level with coaching change, you typically it's rough. I think I saw a tweet last week that had a bunch of programs that still had, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 scholarships out there. I think that really, really illustrates how hard it is to fill your roster because, and there's no knock to those guys, they probably just don't want to fill their roster just to fill their roster, right? Rather play 7 than have to manage 13. But we were able to, again, with those relationships that we just talked about, guys that I was already familiar with, that I recruited at other institutions where the relationships was already there. Darius Maddox, who's a key piece for us that, started out at Virginia Tech, came down to Seton Hall in Virginia Tech when I was at Seton Hall. So we had a relationship there as well. Jared Billups, who's another local kid that, has played well and, showed signs that, his ceiling can still grow. I was at Siena. He's also a local kid that our staff had a relationship with. I watched Keyshawn Hall 2 years ago when I was at Ohio State going to go watch another kid. And I just remember seeing him and I was so impressed by him, like, this kid can really play. You fast forward, he had no idea that I knew so much about him in that conversation. And he was a really, really good piece at UNLV as a freshman. Woody Newton, again, another local guy that we recruited at Seton Hall. He ended up going to Syracuse and obviously transferred to Oklahoma State. But again, a guy that's played and started, 75 games in the P5. Amari Kelly, I recruited way back. I'm not trying to tell his age, but when I was at Louisiana Tech, I recruited him when he ended up going to Duquesne. And he ends up coming to, when I got the job, it was one of the first phone calls that I got. And then also, Nico Pavretti from Central Michigan, international kid that I had some ties to. And again, going through this list, these are all names that if you don't have these relationships prior, it makes it just so much more difficult to fill your roster. And so for that, between myself and my staff, we've just been fortunate to get these pieces because, again, you get maybe 2, maybe 3 of these pieces. I think we got, 6 really, really good pieces. And I can't forget the only freshman that kind of stayed on in that incoming class with Kim and his staff, Austin Ball, he's become one of my favorite guys, man. He's got a ball of energy. He never seems to stop talking, which I actually like. And in workouts, he's looked really good as well, can really shoot the basketball. And again, he's an energy giver, and that's always a good thing. So I'm really happy with what, where our team is right now.
Definitely. Well, that was one of the first things as the commitments came in for you guys, I realized even just talking to coaches, people don't commit if there isn't that relationship or that trust.
Yeah.
So for me, it was obvious, not that you needed to prove anything, but even as a first year head coach, that obviously you have those relationships to have that happen, like you said, so quickly late in the game in terms of your hire. But listen, I don't want to take any more of your time. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to kind of the next chapter of George Mason in the A10, and we'll be in touch for sure. But best of luck with the off-season workouts.
No, absolutely. Now it's good to put the face with. I keep seeing the Twitter A10 vault, but it's always good to put a face with the logo, man. So I definitely appreciate you having me on. And any other time, man, just feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks, man.